Bitcoin's been the big one this year. 2024 has been a huge year for Bitcoin. So we saw, probably the biggest news of the year was the
ETFs.
spot ETFs getting approved in the
time.
US, which basically provide an avenue for institutions to basically just, get into Bitcoin, because before it was like exchanges and some didn't want to do that nor go via that route.
Well, that's right. If you look at I guess the bylaws of a lot of investment firms, they don't have the capacity to actually invest in a lot of these products because of the way they're custodied and other complexities too. So, having Bitcoin available through something like a stock traded exchange, it's changed the landscape for us completely, right? And we're seeing that Bitcoin now, soaring past 100K yesterday, big six figures finally locked in. It's a huge moment.
Awesome to see. And don't forget, we also had the halving this year, which is people seem to forget that because of all the other major news we've had. But the halving, I think it was the fourth halving in Bitcoin's history, basically means the Bitcoin, the new supply of Bitcoin entering the market is halved, which, from an economics standpoint, you look at, you want high demand and low supply, and that drives prices higher. And obviously that new supply entering the market is reduced. So that's a good thing for the economics. Often we see a bull market follow a halving event, and, we're seeing that now. But obviously there's other contributing factors as well, like the ETFs. Also, Donald Trump and the US election. Talk to me about that, Pav.
Well, it was quite an interesting, redemption mark for Bitcoin and crypto in general, right? It's always been the talk of the town of what countries ban Bitcoin or who's sort of scathing it in the media. Peter Schiff's always had something great to say about, or never anything great to say about Bitcoin. But this was an interesting one, right? We saw a lot of the presidential candidates, even some of the independents, talking about how crypto was, a key part of their campaign. I don't know. I didn't expect that. Did you?
No, but it was massive, right? Even Kamala Harris knew that she needed to, because Trump had such a strong stance on Bitcoin and crypto. Kamala Harris even came out and said, this will be part of my campaign. She didn't really do too much, but in the end, she didn't win. So Trump's big promise was that, if he becomes president, he'll build a strategic reserve of Bitcoin, which means the US government will buy Bitcoin for its own reserves to pay off its national debt, which is, if true, that could be the biggest, piece of bullish news we've had in the last decade. Totally. That is incredible.
Especially when you think about what sort of knock-on effect that will have in other jurisdictions, other countries, other sovereign nations. This could be something quite big, right?
I think there was another country that just announced that they're going to build a Bitcoin reserve as well, but I forget what it is. Anyway, I assume that the US won't be the only country to do it.
No, I don't think so.
Cool. And so that's Bitcoin. But then there's also, the altcoins and the asset categories, right? So
bit of an evolution, right?
Bit of an evolution. So we obviously had altcoins in the last cycle and even the cycle before that, but they have sort of the way that the altcoin direction is going has changed a lot. So last cycle we saw a lot of layer ones do well, Ethereum, Solana, Cardano,
Phantom,
Avalanche, all those.
Yeah.
That is still somewhat the case, but we've seen new sectors form, particularly with AI. We've seen the meme coin sector go ballistic. There's just a million meme coins out on the market, which we'll touch on later. What else?
Yeah, I think just to branch off what you started with, I think everyone saw the limitations of the layer 1 technologies. So there was almost like an arms race to scale the L1s via L2s, so the layer 2 technologies. And then even the newer generation L1s that we have been seeing, so let's say Sei and Sui and Celestia, we took modular blockchains, which, jury's out at if they're good or bad technology long term. But even just changing their approach to, I guess, how consensus is reached on a lot of these protocols, there was this next speed race, who could do the fastest transactions with the greatest capacity, right? And all I remember, I guess, of the early makings of the bull market that we did see was a lot of those assets just rise to just the skies. They just went crazy. So cooled down a little bit now, but obviously Sui's been a pretty big standout. I know, Ted, that's been doing quite well for you as well, but it has been interesting that there's been a bit of, while it's not the same, it's definitely rhyming. We're talking about what we saw last cycle. So it's almost a market speculating, well, where are people going to be doing business next? And Coinbase launching Base Chain, we can't not talk about that.
Yeah, that's pretty major.
That was pretty big, right? So
yeah, we saw the inception of DeFi as well last cycle. That's evolved, which we'll touch on in a sec. But yeah, it's been massive for those. But we're going to break that down later on in the show and really touch on what coins we're looking at in each of those sectors. Now, the last thing to touch on is probably a huge piece as well is regulation, right?
Yeah.
Following the FTX downfall and the likes FTX and things like that, we saw sort of like the SEC in the US led by Gary Gensler, who was put in by the Biden administration. Like he really went after the crypto scene. Like, and I don't know if he went about it in the right way because he sort of had a point to prove after that FTX thing. He went after the likes of Coinbase, Binance,
even Ethereum and a whole bunch of those projects we just mentioned, trying to dub them as securities, handing out. Well, I think when we were doing the podcast, obviously, I think there was a good 4-month period where every week we had something about someone getting a Wells notice or.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was countless lawsuits, and it hasn't turned out too well for them. Like I know Binance US got in a little bit of trouble with the Department of Justice, so that was shut down, but Binance obviously still exists outside the US. Coinbase seemed to be doing the right thing, and so I don't know where the lawsuit is at currently, but from the updates, it seems like they're in a pretty decent position. But we might need to touch on that. We might need to look into that a bit further.
No, I think so. But yeah, it's a good shout. I think.
What about Europe?
Yeah, like I think the biggest takeaway for me, like I do want to lean more on the positive, I think, in this angle, because I feel like the one question we were all asking ourselves last cycle is crypto actually ever going to get regulated, right? Or is this just some sort of political farce that everyone's always just going to use to grab some attention time to time? And what we've seen in Europe is probably the most progressive thing to date, right? We've seen the MiCA bill in Europe basically classify and legislate stablecoins, which they've dubbed as eCash. So there is now legally sort of legislated stablecoins operating within European exchanges. It has resulted in some other stablecoins being delisted in those countries, but to me that's like probably one of the most bullish things I've seen fundamentally for the industry. And we would talk about like, just someone being first and then the ripple wave of momentum that could cause. I don't think there's a world where in the next 2-3 years we're not seeing other things be classified and regulated. I think it's a very positive sign.
Yeah, and even on our shores in Australia, like they're not moving as fast as say Europe, but they are looking to regulate the Aussie crypto space. I think so far they've kind of looked at the exchanges, but they're starting to move towards that token mapping piece where are they considering stable coins a financial product? Like they're asking those questions from people in the industry, and so we might get those answers sometime within the next 12 to 24 months.
You hope so. Yeah. And I don't know, you were talking about it before in the office, even just the recent appointment of the new Gary Gensler's replacement in SEC that we just talked about, being pro-crypto.
Yeah, very bullish, very bullish. I'm actually going to touch on him later when we look into the real-world asset space.
Yeah, so that's exciting.
But I think that's probably it for the major updates in the last 12 to 24 months. Obviously, there's been so much happening.
There's things outside the crypto space which have invariably impacted us, like the local regional bank outage in the US as well. That was kind of in the last couple of years. So just again showing that the traditional system isn't not without its sort of flaws as well. So
yeah, absolutely.